Hey everybody! In today's video I want to discuss a topic that's probably not going to be the most pleasant of topics, but it is one that I think is worth discussing, and I have a reason for wanting to discuss it now, and we'll get into that in the latter part of the video. But I want to start by asking you a question, and I don't want you to answer this question to me. I want you to just answer this question to yourself and just think about it. But what lengths would you be willing to go to save a fish you had that was suffering from some ailment? Now, there's a lot of different things to factor in here. At least for me, there's a lot of different things to factor in here. And I can only speak for myself in this particular video, which is why I said that you need to think about this for your own right. I'm just throwing this out there as food for thought. But I'm going to tell you where I stand and how I feel about this, and allow you to, think whatever you want to think. And you can certainly share your thoughts, opinions, comments, or whatever down below. But for me, the idea that there is no lengths too great to go to save a fish because it's your fish and you took on the responsibility of taking care of it and so on and so forth. I understand all that, but I also keep it within the realm of practical reality. The idea that no length is too great to go to is simply ridiculous. I'm not going to spend $10,000 on surgery to correct the broken spine of a neon. That's not realistic. So the idea that no length is too great to go to, I think we can all agree, is hyperbole. That's not a real statement. And if it's not a real statement, then that means all of us are on the same page that somewhere is a line we draw where you finally say, okay, that's too much. Whether it's too much time, it's too much effort, it's too much money, whatever. There's a cutoff point on where you're going to stop putting time, effort, money, resources, or whatever into trying to save a sick fish. The likelihood of the fish's survival is going to play a role into it. If it's got an illness that in your experience you've never seen a fish recover from, you're probably going to put a little less effort into trying to get it through something like ick or something that's fairly common that fish are more than likely to recover from, provided you put some effort into it. So that should play a factor into it. Like it or not, the dollar value of the fish plays a factor into it for most people. I have a hard time believing that anybody would treat 99-cent guppy the same as they treat a $3,000 freshwater stingray. I just don't find that to be realistic. I don't think anybody's going to treat those two fish the same. And that dollar factor, the rarity value, the difficulty in acquiring the fish, those are all going to play factors. For me, the sentimental value plays a factor. Even if it's just a neon, if it's a neon I've had in a tank for years, that neon's going to hold more sentimental value to me than one that's in my quarantine tank that I just picked up on sale yesterday. And like it or not, that's just reality for me. Again, you may feel completely different, but that's how I feel about it. I'm just simply not going to feel the same about a neon that dies in my quarantine tank 2 days after I bought it versus one that I've watched grow old in one of my tanks for 7 or 8 years. So all of these things play a factor into deciding where that cutoff line is going to be between how much effort, time, resources, etc., versus just, doing what you can do and hoping for the best, and if it doesn't make it, it doesn't make it, And that's where I stand right now on a couple of my fish that I've got in my 125, that's just out of view on the camera here. I've got one sick loach in there. I had one that passed away recently, and I have a second loach that I think is probably suffering from whatever the other two have suffered from. It's starting to get a little bit skinny. Now, I'm going to talk about the whole what's going on with the loach in a separate video right now than this, but right now I just want to bring up the fact that a lot of people have made a lot of different suggestions on how to treat that loach and what I need to do to it, and almost all of them in some fashion or another, whether the people realize it or not, involves me basically dismantling my 125. I either have to dismantle the whole thing to get the loach out of there. Once I've taken it out of there, the fish has been in the tank, so it's been contaminated. If I ever want to move that fish back into that tank, I'm going to have to dismantle my 125, strip everything out, sterilize everything, and then rebuild it, and basically it'll be a new tank. You can never, the idea that I'm going to take everything out and carefully put it back, and the tank is just going to be the same, that's just not reality. If I do that much work, even if I remove the bare minimum amount of stuff just to collect the loach and get it out of there, that in itself is going to disrupt the tank so much that I've basically just wrecked my 125 and I'll be starting over. Having said all that and done all that, I'm already medicating the loach in the tank and it's not responding to the medication. I don't see how putting it in a different tank is going to cause it to start responding to the medication. There are reasons, if it were responding to the medication, there are reasons for wanting to move it and so on and so forth. Again, I wouldn't go through that effort, but at least there would be reasons to do that. I'm in a situation where I don't even see the point in moving it. If it's not responding to the medication in one tank, it's not going to respond to the medication in another tank. So going through all of that effort and trying to collect the loach up out of there, because you can't use a net to collect loaches. I'd have to do this and collect it in some sort of trap or plastic container, and it is an absolute nightmare trying to catch a loach, even in a little 10-gallon tank, let alone 125 heavily planted, heavily decored, or decorated, I guess would be the correct word there. Heavily decorated tank. It's just, no, I'm not going through all of that effort, because in the long run, the loach is probably going to die anyway. I watched the other one go through it. I did everything I could with the medications. I tried several different medications, and it never got better. It just got worse and worse and worse. Same thing's happening with this loach. Again, I just don't see putting all this effort into this thing when, in my experience, it's probably just going to die anyway. I've already spent over $60 in medication. I've medicated the tank 3 times. I've put airstone in there. I've got multiple different types of medication. I'm putting multiple different types of food in there. So I'm not just ignoring this loach and just saying, oh, well, if it dies, it dies. I'm putting effort into it. I'm putting time into it. I'm putting money and resources into it. I'm just drawing the line at tearing down my 125. I'm sorry, but it's just a fish. I'm not going to destroy my 125 for that loach. If it dies, then it'll die. I'm sorry about that, but I'm not tearing down my 125 and destroying that tank just to pull a loach out of there to try to give it the same exact medication I'm already giving it in a different tank. That makes no sense to me whatsoever, and that's just not something I'm willing to even consider. So for anybody that is still watching this, if you haven't gotten the hint yet, you can stop suggesting I catch my loach and take it out of there, because I'm not going to do that. That's just not a realistic option for me. So anyway, the whole point of this video was really just food for thought. That's my specific scenario. That's what's going on with me at the particular moment. But there have been times in the past where I've had to make this type of decision. Do I try to catch the fish and move it out of the tank? Do I spend the money on that kind of medication? Do I treat the whole entire tank? I weigh these kinds of things in when I'm deciding whether or not I want to quarantine fish, or whether it's worth just throwing them right in the tank. The older I get and the more time I spend in the hobby, the more time I think that they should spend in quarantine. But sometimes I get a little, overzealous. I've already got some fish in the quarantine tank, and I may be wanting to bring another fish home. And I will weigh different factors in to decide whether or not it's worth taking the risk. Where am I getting it? Who's the source? What tank is it going into? What other fish are in that tank? This idea that everything's black and white, you should always do this, you should never do that, this should always be done on this, that's just not the kind of world I live in. Everything has gray areas and room for consideration and discussion, and it's got its own unique, considerations that have to be thought about. In this situation, with this 125 is no different, and that's where I'm drawing the line. Again, I'm willing to spend the money, I'm willing to spend the time, I'm doing the water changes, I'm heating the tank, I'm doing lots of stuff to try to help this loach. I'm not willing to tear down my 125 and try to catch the loach and get it out of there and put it in a hospital tank and sterilize it and so on and so forth. That's where I'm drawing my line on that. So again, I'd be interested to hear your comments. I'd like to hear your thoughts. Where do you draw your line? What kind of factors, things do you, think about and factor in and consider when you're deciding these, making these decisions, whether or not you want to medicate or treat or remove or switch, or even when it's time to euthanize. That's something to consider. Is it worth spending the money to, try to save this fish, or is it so far gone that it's better to just put it out of its misery? So these are all part of the fish keeping hobby, and again, it might not be the more pleasant aspects of things we have to think about, but they're the realistic things we have to think about. They're decisions you have to make every day when you're keeping fish. Well, maybe not every day, but you know what I mean. They are decisions that have to be made by somebody somewhere on a regular basis in the fish keeping hobby, and it's worth talking about. It's worth thinking about. So there you go. That was today's topic discussion. I'm going to get out of here, hit the kayak, and hopefully I'll have a less thoughtful afternoon out on the water, I'll be able to just sit back, relax, and enjoy the scenery. So make sure you're subscribed. Don't forget that this one here behind me is my waterfall tank. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. And I'll see you real soon on the next one.